You ever hear of a man called Lefty Ruggiero? Benjamin, they named him, but no one ever called him that. To his friends, if you could call anyone in that life a real friend, he was Lefty. Lefty Two Guns, wise guy, Brooklyn-born, raised rough, died quiet. Now, Lefty wasn't the kind of gangster you see in movies, all sharp suits and perfect hair. He was from the old school, the kind of guy who believed in rules, codes, loyalty. He wasn't a boss, not a flashy killer. But he put in his work, did his time, and he never asked questions he didn't want the answers to. He had that look, the tired eyes of a man who'd seen too much and forgot even more. By the time he hit his 60s, he'd been through 4 wars, none of them with uniforms, all of them with friends turned enemies. And yet, he stayed loyal to the Bonanno family, loyal to the only life he ever knew. But this story ain't about honor. This is about betrayal. The kind that doesn't come loud, it comes quiet, in a smile, in a handshake, in a guy who tells you he's your friend, but he's been wired the whole time. His name was Joseph Pistone. But Lefty never knew him as that. To Lefty, he was Donnie Brasco, a supposed jewel thief, a guy who knew how to move diamonds, talk smooth, act tough. Lefty took to him like a brother, taught him the life, let him in, put his name, his reputation, on the line for him. And in their world, that meant something. That meant everything. You don't vouch for a man unless you die for him, or kill for him. And Lefty did both. He walked Donnie through back alleys in Little Italy, introduced him to real guys, captains, soldiers, earners, took him to sit-downs, counted money with him, ate Sunday dinners with him, talked about family, pain, the old days. But Donnie, he wasn't just some thief from nowhere. He was FBI, and every conversation, every secret, every little moment recorded, fed straight into the hands of the government. Lefty didn't know, not then, not for 6 long years. And it's funny, or maybe it's tragic, how blind trust can be when it feels like brotherhood. Lefty was nearing the end of his rope by then. The streets were changing. New blood didn't care about rules. They shot first, talked never. Old guys like him, they were becoming fossils. But with Donnie by his side, Lefty felt like maybe, just maybe, he still had a shot. One last climb, one last big score. He started dreaming again, not about riches. No, Lefty never lived fancy. Never had a mansion or a Cadillac with white seats, but he dreamed of respect, of a legacy, of being remembered. Then one day, Donnie vanished, gone, just like that. No warning, no goodbye. At first, Lefty thought maybe something went wrong, a bust, a beef with another crew, but the silence kept stretching. Days turned to weeks, and then the news broke. Joe Pistone, undercover FBI agent 6 years deep. It hit Lefty like a bullet to the chest, not just because of what Donnie was, but because of what it meant. Everything Lefty had told him, everything he'd shown him, it was all evidence now. And in their world, when you bring in a rat, even by accident, you pay the price. The bosses summoned him. They didn't scream, didn't shout. They just looked at him, tired, heavy, disappointed. And Lefty knew. He didn't cry, didn't beg. He just lit a cigarette, looked out the window, and waited for the knock that would end it all. After the news broke, the streets changed. Not in a loud way, no. It was quiet, too quiet. Phone calls stopped. Doors that used to be wide open started closing, little by little. No one said anything directly, not at first. That's how it works in that life. Words don't mean much. Eyes do. Gestures. Who looks at you, who doesn't? And Lefty, well, he felt it in his gut before anybody told him out loud. Donnie, Joe Pistone, had been the biggest betrayal of his life. But the thing that hurt more was that deep down, Lefty still cared about the guy. He tried not to. God knows, he tried. He cursed his name, called him a snake, a rat, a fed. But when he was alone, really alone, late at night, sitting by his window with a drink and the city buzzing soft beneath him, he remembered the laughs, the late-night talks, The way Donnie listened when nobody else gave a damn. See, in a world full of wolves, Lefty had been one of the few old lions. Not soft, no, never that. But he still had a heart. And when he gave it to someone, he gave it all the way. And now, that heart was cracked down the middle. He kept telling himself, I should have seen it. But how could he? Donnie knew how to talk the talk. He moved like them, ate like them, dressed like them. And more than anything, he listened like them. Most young guys. They come in too loud, too hungry, always proving something. But not Donnie. He watched, took his time, knew when to shut up. That's what made him dangerous, and that's what made him trusted. For 6 years, Donnie walked beside Lefty. Through bars, clubs, card games, shakedowns, they talked about family. Lefty even told him about his son Tommy, who couldn't seem to get clean. They broke bread together, laughed about the old days, even sat in the same car, dead quiet, waiting on a guy who owed money and hadn't paid. 6 years of trust, burned down in 6 minutes of headlines. Lefty couldn't even walk into his old diner without feeling eyes on him. Guys he'd grown up with, suddenly quiet when he came in, like he had a smell on him, that smell of betrayal. Even though he'd been the one betrayed. But that's the thing about the mob. It doesn't care who meant well. It only cares who brought heat. And Lefty? He'd brought a storm. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the news broke, Lefty got a call. Not from a friend, not from his old partner, not even from his wife. It was from a guy named Vito, an associate, low level, always trying to climb the ladder. Vito said, "You should come see Sonny." That's all. Didn't say why, didn't have to. Sonny Black, that was Lefty's captain, his boss. The guy who'd let Lefty into his inner circle, trusted him with numbers, names, moves. If Sonny was asking for him, it wasn't for coffee. Lefty hung up the phone slow, finished his drink, put on the same coat he always wore, brown, a little torn at the cuff. Then he opened his drawer. Inside was a cheap .38, old but still loaded. He looked at it for a long time. Didn't take it, just shut the drawer and said real low, "If it's my time, it's my time." The walk to Sonny's place was short, just a few blocks, but it felt like miles. People on the street didn't look twice. Just another old Italian guy, walking slow, head down, hands in his coat pockets. But inside, Lefty's heart was thudding like war drums. Every step, he wondered, will it be fast? Will it be loud? Will they do it in the face or the back? That was the thing with mob hits. Sometimes they were clean, sometimes messy, but they were always personal. And Lefty knew he should be clipped. In their world, you vouch for a guy, and he turns out to be a Fed. That's blood on your hands. He climbed the stairs to Sonny's apartment, slow, creaky steps. His knees hurt, his back ached, but he didn't let it show. At the top, he knocked once, not loud, just enough. Door opened. Vito let him in. Didn't smile. Didn't say a word. Lefty stepped inside. Place smelled like cigar smoke and old sweat, same as always. Sonny sat in his chair, behind that little wooden table. He didn't get up, just looked at Lefty for a long, long time, then finally said, "Sit." Lefty did. Didn't argue, didn't explain. Silence sat between them like a loaded gun on the table. Then Sonny said it, flat, cold. "You brought him in." Lefty nodded once. "I did." "You vouched." Another nod. "I did. And he was a fucking Fed." This time, Lefty didn't nod, didn't look away, just said, soft but clear, "I didn't know." Sonny leaned back, rubbed his face. He looked tired, more than usual. "Donnie was in 6 years. You were with him damn near every day." "I didn't know," Lefty repeated. "If I did, I'd have killed him myself." Sonny didn't answer right away, just lit a cigar, blew out a long, heavy cloud of smoke. Then he said, "You know what the bosses want." Lefty stayed still. "I know. They think you should be gone, make it clean, end of story." "I know. But I told them, you're old school. You didn't run. You didn't lie. You came here. Sonny leaned forward. So I'll ask you one time. You sure you didn't know? Lefty's eyes stayed steady. As sure as I am, I'm sitting here. More silence. Then Sonny reached into a drawer, pulled out something small. Not a gun, not a knife, an envelope, thick. He slid it across the table. Take that. Go home. Stay quiet. Lefty looked at it, but didn't touch it. You ain't gonna clip me? He asked, voice low. Sonny shook his head. Not today. Lefty walked home slow. His heart didn't race anymore. His legs didn't shake. But something inside him cracked, something final. He wasn't dead. But he wasn't really alive anymore either. In their world, being let go like that, it meant something. It meant you were finished. Not out of fear, not out of mercy, just irrelevant. He'd been spared, not out of love, but because killing him wouldn't fix what had already been broken. And that, in some ways, was worse. That night, he didn't turn on the TV, didn't eat, didn't drink. Just sat in his chair by the window, looking down at the streetlights. He thought about Donnie, wondered if he was out there somewhere, still working, still playing the game. Or maybe he'd retired, moved to the suburbs, started a new life with a new name. Lefty didn't hate him, not really. He felt betrayed, yeah. But more than that, he felt used. Like all those years, all those talks, all that trust, it had been part of the job for Donnie, part of the act. But for Lefty, it had been real. And that's what broke him. Because in the end, all a man has is the truth he believes in. And Lefty's truth had turned out to be a lie. He lit a cigarette, watched the smoke curl up toward the ceiling. Then he said, almost to himself, "They say never trust nobody. I guess I forgot." After the news broke, the streets changed. Not in a loud way, no. It was quiet. Too quiet. Phone calls stopped. Doors that used to be wide open started closing, little by little. No one said anything directly, not at first. That's how it works in that life. Words don't mean much, eyes do, gestures, who looks at you, who doesn't. And Lefty, well, he felt it in his gut before anybody told him out loud. Donnie, Joe Pistone, had been the biggest betrayal of his life. But the thing that hurt more was that deep down, Lefty still cared about the guy. He tried not to. God knows, he tried. He cursed his name, called him a snake, a rat, a fed. But when he was alone, really alone, late at night, sitting by his window with a drink and the city buzzing soft beneath him, he remembered the laughs, the late-night talks, the way Donnie listened when nobody else gave a damn. See, in a world full of wolves, Lefty had been one of the few old lions. Not soft, no, never that. But he still had a heart, and when he gave it to someone, he gave it all the way. And now, that heart was cracked down the middle. He kept telling himself, I should have seen it. But how could he? Donnie knew how to talk the talk. He moved like them, ate like them, dressed like them, and more than anything, he listened like them. Most young guys, they come in too loud, too hungry, always proving something, but not Donnie. He watched, took his time. Knew when to shut up. That's what made him dangerous, and that's what made him trusted. For 6 years, Donnie walked beside Lefty, through bars, clubs, card games, shakedowns. They talked about family. Lefty even told him about his son, Tommy, who couldn't seem to get clean. They broke bread together, laughed about the old days, even sat in the same car, dead quiet, waiting on a guy who owed money and hadn't paid. 6 years of trust, burned down in 6 minutes of headlines. Lefty couldn't even walk into his old diner without feeling eyes on him. Guys he'd grown up with, suddenly quiet when he came in, like he had a smell on him, that smell of betrayal. Even though he'd been the one betrayed. But that's the thing about the mob. It doesn't care who meant well. It only cares who brought heat. And Lefty? He'd brought a storm. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the news broke, Lefty got a call. Not from a friend, not from his old partner, not even from his wife. It was from a guy named Vito, an associate, low level, always trying to climb the ladder. Vito said, "You should come see Sonny." That's all. Didn't say why. Didn't have to. Sonny Black, that was Lefty's captain, his boss. The guy who'd let Lefty into his inner circle, trusted him with numbers, names, moves. If Sonny was asking for him, it wasn't for coffee. Lefty hung up the phone slow, finished his drink, put on the same coat he always wore, brown, a little torn at the cuff. Then he opened his drawer. Inside was a cheap .38, old but still loaded. He looked at it for a long time, didn't take it, just shut the drawer and said real low, "If it's my time, it's my time." The walk to Sonny's place was short, just a few blocks, but it felt like miles. People on the street didn't look twice, just another old Italian guy walking slow, head down, hands in his coat pockets. But inside, Lefty's heart was thudding like war drums. Every step, he wondered, will it be fast? Will it be loud? Will they do it in the face or the back? That was the thing with mob hits. Sometimes they were clean, sometimes messy, but they were always personal. And Lefty knew he should be clipped. In their world, you vouch for a guy and he turns out to be a fed. That's blood on your hands. He climbed the stairs to Sonny's apartment, slow, creaky steps. His knees hurt, his back ached, but he didn't let it show. At the top, he knocked once, not loud, just enough. Door opened. Vito let him in, didn't smile, didn't say a word. Lefty stepped inside. Place smelled like cigar smoke and old sweat, same as always. Sonny sat in his chair behind that little wooden table. He didn't get up, just looked at Lefty for a long, long time, then finally said, "Sit." Lefty did. Didn't argue, didn't explain. Silence sat between them like a loaded gun on the table. Then Sonny said it, flat, cold. "You brought him in." Lefty nodded once. "I did." "You vouched." Another nod. "I did. And he was a fucking fed." This time, Lefty didn't nod, didn't look away, just said, soft but clear, "I didn't know." Sonny leaned back, rubbed his face. He looked tired, more than usual. "Donnie was in 6 years. You were with him damn near every day." "I didn't know," Lefty repeated. "If I did, I'd have killed him myself." Sonny didn't answer right away, just lit a cigar. Blew out a long, heavy cloud of smoke. Then he said, "You know what the bosses want." Lefty stayed still. "I know. They think you should be gone. Make it clean. End of story." "I know. But I told them, you're old school. You didn't run. You didn't lie. You came here." Sonny leaned forward. "So I'll ask you one time. You sure you didn't know?" Lefty's eyes stayed steady. "As sure as I am, I'm sitting here." More silence. Then Sonny reached into a drawer, pulled out something small. Not a gun. Not a knife. An envelope. Thick. He slid it across the table. "Take that. Go home. Stay quiet." Lefty looked at it, but didn't touch it. "You ain't gonna clip me?" he asked, voice low. Sonny shook his head. "Not today." Lefty walked home slow. His heart didn't race anymore. His legs didn't shake. But something inside him cracked, something final. He wasn't dead, but he wasn't really alive anymore either. In their world, being let go like that, it meant something. It meant you were finished. Not out of fear, not out of mercy. Just irrelevant? He'd been spared, not out of love, but because killing him wouldn't fix what had already been broken. And that, in some ways, was worse. That night, he didn't turn on the TV, didn't eat, didn't drink. Just sat in his chair by the window, looking down at the streetlights. He thought about Donnie. Wondered if he was out there somewhere, still working, still playing the game. Or maybe he'd retired, moved to the suburbs, started a new life with a new name. Lefty didn't hate him, not really. He felt betrayed, yeah, but more than that. He felt used. Like all those years, all those talks, all that trust. It had been part of the job for Donnie, part of the act. But for Lefty, it had been real. And that's what broke him. Because in the end, All a man has is the truth he believes in. And Lefty's truth had turned out to be a lie. He lit a cigarette, watched the smoke curl up toward the ceiling. Then he said, almost to himself, "They say never trust nobody. I guess I forgot." Long before Donnie, long before betrayal, before the cold apartments and broken family ties, Lefty was just Benjamin Ruggiero. And before he ever held a gun, he held a mop. He was born in 1926, deep in the heart of Little Italy, Manhattan, back when the buildings were all soot-stained. The air smelled like coal smoke and tomato sauce, and every block had a name, a code, and a man who ran it. His father had been a tailor, worked long hours, made barely enough to keep bread on the table. Lefty's mother, Maria, cooked, cleaned, prayed, and worried herself into sickness. They had 4 boys. 2 lived past childhood. Life was hard, but simple. The neighborhood raised you as much as your parents did. And the streets, they noticed things. Lefty noticed them too. He watched the men in long coats who never seemed to work but always had fresh bills in their pocket. The ones who walked slow, never rushed, like the world bent to them. He watched how they were greeted, not with fear, but with respect. The old women gave them blessings. The young guys nodded, stepped aside. And Lefty, only a boy then, asked his older brother once, "Who are those men?" His brother shook his head like he'd asked something dangerous. "You don't talk about them, you just listen." And Lefty listened, more than he spoke, always did. By 14, he was skipping school more than attending. By 15, he was running numbers for a guy named Fat Sal, who ran a backroom game behind a fish market. Nothing serious, just envelopes, messages, little errands. But that's how it always starts. You carry the cash. Then you collect the debts. Then one day, someone tells you to hurt someone. And you do. Because by then, you've already chosen. Lefty earned his first stripe at 17. A local guy, Louis Beans, owed money and refused to pay. Claimed he got robbed, said he had no more cash. Fat Sal didn't believe him. Nobody did. They sent Lefty and 2 others, young, hungry, trying to prove themselves. They found Louis in his candy shop, sweeping up near closing. Lefty was the quiet one. The other 2 shouted, made a mess, knocked over shelves. But it was Lefty who grabbed Louis by the collar, slammed him against the wall, looked him in the eyes and said, "Next time you lie, you ain't gonna talk again." It was the way he said it, calm, no yelling, that cold certainty in his voice. Louis paid the next morning. Word got around. The kid with the heavy stare, the one who doesn't talk much, he's serious. By 19, Lefty had made his bones. You know what that means, don't you? It means he killed for the first time. It wasn't for anger. It wasn't even personal. It was an order. The man, Mikey Greco, had been skimming from the top, running side deals behind the crew's back. The bosses needed it handled quiet. Fat Sal picked Lefty. He didn't flinch, didn't ask why. Just said, "You want it done clean or messy?" Sal smiled. "Clean." Lefty followed Mikey one night, waited till he was leaving a social club in the Bronx, pulled up alongside him in a borrowed car, window down. "Mikey," he turned, smiled. Then the .38 barked once, low and mean. Headshot. Quick, lights out. Lefty drove to the East River, tossed the gun, then walked home, took off his coat, ate leftover spaghetti, slept fine. That's the part no one understands, how some guys can sleep like babies after a kill. But it wasn't about the blood. It was about what it meant. Loyalty, obedience, trust. Lefty had proved he was reliable, and in their world, that was worth more than gold. He got his button 2 years later, in a dark basement in Queens, surrounded by 5 made men and a burning saint card. They pricked his finger, let the blood drip onto the image of a saint, held the card in his palm as it burned. Then they said, "If you betray this family, may your soul burn in hell like this saint." Lefty didn't blink. He was in. Officially. A soldier of the Bonanno crime family. The 50s were good to him. He married a local girl, Angela, had 2 kids, A daughter, then Tommy. Bought a small home in Brooklyn with thick red bricks and a tired garden in the back. But he wasn't around much. Nights were for the streets, poker games, bookie shops, cigarette trucks, union deals. Angela cried sometimes. But Lefty, he figured she knew what she was signing up for. He wasn't violent at home, never raised a hand. But he was absent, and absence can be its own kind of wound. By the time Tommy was 10, Lefty was pulling in real money. He had respect, he had a name, not a boss, never wanted to be one, but a trusted soldier. A guy you could call for clean work. He did collections, protection, ran Shylocks and gambling dens. Once he went to Miami for 3 weeks, came back with 20 grand in a paper bag. Angela didn't ask. She never asked. She spent most nights watching soap operas, whispering prayers in a language only her rosary understood. The neighbors didn't say much, but they knew. Lefty Ruggiero was one of those men, and that meant you minded your business. But even back then, there were cracks. New guys came in, younger, faster, greedy, didn't follow rules, didn't respect rank. Lefty started seeing things change. The streets were louder, guns flashed quicker. Guys got killed over insults, not business. And the bosses, they turned soft, or paranoid, or both. Lefty started drinking more, stopped going home on weekends. Angela stopped waiting up. Tommy started sneaking out. By 15, he was running with the wrong kids. By 16, he was using. At 17, he got picked up for robbery. And Lefty? He showed up at the station, didn't yell, didn't hit him, just looked him in the eye and said, "You're breaking your mother's heart." That was all. But Tommy never forgot that look. He never forgot how it didn't feel like fear. It felt like failure. The 70s came and went like smoke. Lefty was older, meaner, but still working. Angela passed in 78. Cancer. Quiet. Peaceful. Lefty sat at her bedside for the last 2 days. Didn't say much. Just held her hand. When she died, he didn't cry. Just nodded, like he'd expected it. After that, he threw himself deeper into the life. And that's when Donnie Brasco walked in. Like a new chapter in a book Lefty didn't know was ending. Donnie was everything Lefty had wanted in a son. Smart, tough, curious, listened when he spoke, never looked down on him. Lefty took to him fast, faster than he should have. Introduced him to guys he never would have introduced a civilian to, told him things he never said out loud. Why? Because Lefty was lonely. Angela was gone. Tommy was lost. And here was this new kid, sharp, loyal, ready to learn. Lefty saw himself in Donnie, saw what he could have been if someone had given him a chance back then. So he opened up. He let him in. And for 6 years, he thought he finally had something solid, a real connection, a second chance. But in the end, it was just another lie. Now, sitting in that dim apartment, staring at old photos on the wall, faded by smoke and time, Lefty could still remember the feel of the Saint card burning in his hand, the heat, the pain, the promise. He had betrayed no one, but he had been betrayed by everyone, and sometimes that's worse. The day after Tommy left, Lefty stayed in bed longer than usual. Didn't shave, didn't smoke his first cigarette until noon. The apartment was still, too still. No street noise, no footsteps overhead, just the hum of the old refrigerator and the slow creak of the radiator heating up. He looked over at the empty couch. The army blanket was still crumpled there, still smelled faintly like his son, sweat, cigarettes, and whatever sadness clung to a boy trying to stay clean. Lefty didn't touch it, didn't move it, just left it there like a reminder, or maybe a prayer. He poured himself a cup of coffee. No cream, no sugar. Sat at the table with a cigarette balanced in the ashtray, untouched, and listened. To nothing. They say when the FBI closes in, it doesn't happen all at once. There's no sirens, no spotlights. It starts in the shadows, with whispers, questions, missing faces. Guys start disappearing, not from bullets, but from silence. Lefty first noticed it when Joey Beans stopped calling, then Mikey Flats, then Vito, the same Vito who let him in to see Sonny that day, vanished like smoke. Not a word. One week, they're sitting at the back of a deli talking numbers. Next week, their names in sealed indictments. And that's when Lefty knew. Donnie hadn't just burned him personally. He'd lit a fuse that was running straight through the heart of the family. See, Donnie, or Joe Pistone, if we're being real, wasn't just an agent. He was a mole buried so deep in their operations, he didn't just witness crimes. He lived them. He moved money, sat in on meetings, broke bread with captains, traveled with lieutenants. He wasn't just in the room, he was at the table. And that meant every word he heard, every move he saw, was now sitting in some evidence box with an FBI tag. Hundreds of tapes, photos, conversations caught on wire, Lefty's voice, his actual voice, played back in fluorescent-lit rooms in Washington, D.C. and downtown Manhattan, played for prosecutors, for juries, for guys in suits who didn't know what it meant to take an oath over a burning saint. And one by one, the old guard started to fall. Lefty didn't hear from Sonny Black for a while, not directly anyway. He heard whispers, that Sonny was laying low, that he'd been summoned by the bosses, asked to explain how an FBI agent got that close, for that long, under his watch. And Lefty, he felt the guilt. Felt it like a slow poison. He'd vouched for Donnie. He'd been the one to bring him in. Sure, Sonny had signed off. Sure, others had embraced him. But it was Lefty's word that opened the door. And in the end, that meant his name was stained the deepest. He wondered sometimes if that was why Sonny had spared him, not out of mercy, but because the shame was punishment enough. Then, one morning in July 1981, the news hit the papers. FBI infiltrates Mafia for 6 years. Big headline, front page, photos of Donnie Brasco smiling, his real name printed bold, Joseph D. Pistone. Details spilled across the columns, wiretaps, transcripts, indictments, names, so many names, capos, soldiers, associates. The Bonanno family hit hardest, and right there, in the mix, Benjamin Lefty Ruggiero. They didn't say much, just called him an influential soldier closely tied to the operation. That was enough. Now, everyone in the world knew what only the streets had whispered. Lefty was the man who let the feds in the front door, and that kind of stain doesn't wash off. Ever. The next week, Lefty started noticing strange cars on his block, parked too long, windows tinted just enough. And one night, he took a walk to the bodega on the corner, got a paper, some smokes, a can of beans. On the way back, a young guy in a blazer stepped out from the shadows near the alley. Tall, clean cut, looked like he shaved twice a day and still never had stubble. "Mr. Ruggiero," he said. Lefty didn't answer. "I'm with the Bureau," the kid continued. "You got a moment?" Lefty lit his cigarette. Blew smoke right past the kid's face. "You got a warrant?" "No, sir. Just some questions." "Then you got nothing." He walked away. Slow, calm, didn't look back. But inside? Inside, he felt the ground shifting under his feet. By August, indictments were falling like rain. Guys he'd known for 30 years were getting locked up. Some flipped, some didn't get the chance. Sonny Black? He disappeared. One day, he was gone. Vanished like mist off the East River. They found him weeks later, dead, tied up, shot in the face, left in a ditch upstate. The bosses had decided somebody had to pay. And Sonny had been the captain who let the Fed in. Someone had to wear that blame. Lefty read the story in the paper. Didn't blink. He folded the page, put it in the trash, lit a fresh cigarette, didn't say a word. That same week, the feds came for Lefty. Early morning, no drama. 2 agents, plain clothes, knocked soft. He opened the door. "You Benjamin Ruggiero," he nodded. "You're under arrest." He didn't resist, didn't argue, just said, "Took you long enough." They didn't hit him with murder, didn't have enough, but they had conspiracy, loan sharking, illegal gambling, federal charges. And with Donnie's tapes, they had conversations, enough to hang a dozen wise guys. He was looking at 20 years. 20 years. At his age, that was a life sentence. But Lefty didn't crack, didn't cut a deal. They tried, offered him protection, new identity, witness relocation, told him they could move him to Arizona, give him a new start. He laughed in their faces. "You think I want to die watering a cactus?" he said. "I'll take Brooklyn." And that was that. He took the plea. 7 years in a federal prison. Prison was slow, not dangerous, not like the state pens where young bloods make their bones with shanks. This was federal time. Old gangsters, white-collar thieves, guys who wore rings on their pinkies and still used shoehorns. Lefty kept to himself, did his routine, wrote letters to no one, got letters from no one. Tommy wrote once, just once, said he was staying clean, had a job at a warehouse, met a girl. Lefty read it twice, then tucked it into his shirt like a warm coin. The other inmates gave him space. He wasn't a snitch. He wasn't loud. Just an old wise guy with tired eyes and a quiet step. And that's the thing about prison. The noise fades. The people fade. But what doesn't fade are the things you can't stop replaying in your head. And for Lefty, that was always Donnie. Not the betrayal, not the badge, but the laughs, the little moments, the trust. He wondered if Donnie ever thought about him, if he felt guilty, or if, when the mission ended, he just walked away, closed that door, and never looked back. In '94, Lefty got out, old, sick, struggling to walk. He moved into a tiny apartment in the Bronx, not the kind of place he once dreamed of, but it had heat and quiet. And by then, that was enough. He'd outlived most of his crew, most of his enemies. Even his name didn't carry weight anymore. Guys didn't whisper when he passed, didn't nod, didn't care. The world had moved on. And Lefty? He was just a footnote now. One line in a book about how the mob got exposed from the inside out. Freedom doesn't always feel like freedom. Not when you come out with a limp, a chest full of pain, and no one waiting for you on the other side of the fence. When Lefty stepped through the gates of that federal prison in 1994, the world didn't stop to greet him. No big welcome, no family, just a cold wind and a corrections officer who didn't even look up as he handed over a brown paper bag with all of Lefty's possessions. A comb, a wallet, an old lighter, one ring, his pinky ring, still dull from time. He'd served 7 years. Could have been worse. But prison wasn't about time, not for a man like him. It was about distance, distance from the life, from the streets, from the noise. And worst of all, distance from the man he used to be. He didn't walk out with a plan, didn't have savings, didn't know who owed him what, if anyone did. The mob world he left behind had either moved on or been buried. The Bonanno family was in shambles. New faces, new blood, new rules. The old school guys were either rats or ghosts. And Lefty? He was just tired. He got a small place in the Bronx. One room, bed by the wall, tiny kitchen with a rust-stained sink, radiator that clanked like it was dying every night. He liked it that way. No visitors, no reminders. Just quiet. He collected Social Security now, a check that barely paid rent, a small pension from the union, though that came late and always short. He spent his mornings walking to the corner deli, got a paper, black coffee, sometimes a Danish, if his stomach didn't turn at the smell of sugar. The owner, a young Dominican kid named Leo, didn't know who he was, didn't care. To Leo, Lefty was just another old man with a face full of gravel and stories he never told. That was fine. Lefty didn't want to be remembered, not anymore. Most days, he'd sit by the window, looking out at the fire escapes across the street, watched pigeons fight over crumbs, watched kids bounce basketballs down cracked sidewalks. It was a different city now, louder in some ways, emptier in others. The neighborhood he grew up in, Little Italy, had shrunk down to a few tourist traps and one overpriced bakery. The rest, gone, swallowed by time, rent, gentrification, replaced with boutiques and cafes that charged $6 for espresso he wouldn't drink if you paid him. Sometimes he'd take the train down there, just to look. He'd walk past Mulberry Street, past the church where he once took Tommy when he was just a boy, past the old social club that had turned into a frozen yogurt shop. He'd stop at the sidewalk and stare through the window. Once. A girl with green hair and a septum ring looked up from her laptop and smiled politely. Lefty just nodded and kept walking. The past didn't live there anymore. One night, back in his apartment, the phone rang. He almost didn't answer. Nobody called. Not unless it was a wrong number or some scam about a car warranty he never had. But something made him pick it up. His hand shook a little as he brought the receiver to his ear. He didn't speak. He just listened. And on the other end, a voice. Soft. Careful. "Mr. Ruggiero," he said nothing. "This is Joe Pistone." Still, Lefty didn't speak. "I wasn't sure if this number was still good," Joe said, "or if you'd even want to talk." A long silence. Then Lefty finally said, "You got some balls." Joe let out a quiet breath. "I know." "You know," Lefty's voice was low, gravel scraping through old lungs. "You don't know nothing, kid." "I just wanted to." "You just wanted to?" Lefty cut in. "You wanted to what, Joe? Catch up? Shoot the shit?" He coughed, sat down slowly at the table. "I spent 7 years in a cage, you know that?" "I know. My son OD'd twice while I was in there. One of those times I didn't even find out till a month later." Silence. "I lost everything. And you went back to your life." Joe didn't respond right away. Then, finally, "I didn't go back to anything, Lefty. I lost a lot, too." "Not enough," Lefty said coldly. "Not nearly enough. I didn't call to make excuses." "Good. Because I'm not accepting any." There was another pause. Then Joe said quietly, "I just wanted to say, I never meant to hurt you." Lefty laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "You were paid to hurt me." "No," Joe replied. "I was paid to do a job. But what I had with you, that was real." Lefty didn't speak. He just sat there, the receiver pressed against his ear, as the smoke from his untouched cigarette curled up like a ghost. "I thought of you a lot," Joe said. "Every day, even after it ended." Lefty swallowed. His voice, when it finally came, was quieter now. "You were the only one left." "I know. You were the last guy I trusted," Lefty said. "And you weren't even real." Joe didn't correct him, didn't defend himself. And maybe that was the only decent thing left to do. "I'm sorry, Lefty." Another long silence. Then Lefty said, barely above a whisper, "I don't forgive you." "I know, but I don't hate you either." Joe's voice cracked a little. "Thank you. I didn't say it for you. I said it for me." Then Lefty hung up the phone and stared at it for a long, long time. After that, things shifted. Not much, but something. He didn't feel lighter, didn't sleep better, but he stopped replaying it, stopped looking back so hard. Instead, he started reading again. Old crime novels, westerns, stuff with tired men and broken horses. He even got a cat, a stray that wandered up to his fire escape and refused to leave. Black fur, white paws. Lefty named her Angie. She slept on the windowsill and stared at him like she knew who he was, but didn't care. Perfect. Tommy called a few months later, said he was still clean, married now, expecting a baby. Lefty sat on the phone and said almost nothing, just listened. At the end, Tommy said, "You gonna come meet him?" Lefty lit a cigarette. "I don't think I'd be good company," he said. "You don't have to be good. You just have to show up." Lefty paused, then softly, "We'll see." Winter came hard that year. Snow piled on the fire escape. The heat clanked on and off like it had arthritis. Angie curled up on his chest at night, purring softly as he drifted in and out of shallow sleep. He started keeping a journal. Nothing fancy, just a cheap notebook from the corner store. He wrote in short sentences, sometimes just one word a day. Pain, quiet, alive. He never read it back, didn't need to. He was writing it for the end, not for memory, but maybe for forgiveness. And that was the life of Benjamin Lefty Ruggiero now. Not a wise guy, not a soldier, not a legend, just a man, old, alone, waiting, but not for death, not anymore. He was waiting for the day he could walk into his son's house, hold his grandson, and say, with all the weight of a broken past behind him, "This life, it wasn't worth it. But you are." In all the years that followed, Lefty never forgot the last week he saw Donnie. Not because it was dramatic, not because there was some big emotional moment, but because there wasn't. That was the part that hurt the most. There was no goodbye, no handshake, no eye contact that said, "I'm sorry," no quiet warning, just nothing. And in that silence, Lefty had played those final days over and over in his head, trying to find the crack, the slip, the moment where he should have known. But it wasn't easy, because Donnie was good, too good. And Lefty, he wasn't stupid. He just didn't want to see it. The last job they did together was supposed to be small. Just to sit down with a guy from Miami, a low-level Cuban dealer named Rico, who'd been stepping on product and shorting the cut. Sonny sent Lefty, and Lefty brought Donnie like always. They met at a bar out in Queens. Dive joint, nothing special. Low music, sticky floors, heavy smell of fried oil and stale beer. Rico showed up wearing gold chains and sunglasses, inside, like he was trying to be someone he wasn't. Lefty hated guys like that. Loud guys. Guys who didn't understand that the ones who really made money never needed to shine. Donnie did all the talking. That was part of the setup. Donnie played the front, Lefty sat back. It was a good routine, worked every time, but this time, something felt off. Not with Rico, with Donnie. He was fidgety, sweating, even though the bar wasn't hot, kept checking the time. Glancing at the door like he was waiting on someone, Lefty clocked it but didn't say nothing. Just filed it away. They finished the meeting, shook hands, and got back in the car. Donnie drove, and for the first time in a long time, the silence between them didn't feel easy. It felt loaded. "You good?" Lefty asked, watching him from the passenger seat. Donnie nodded too fast. "Yeah, just tired." Lefty lit a cigarette, cracked the window. "You seem jumpy," Donnie shrugged. "Didn't sleep much." Lefty stared out the window, didn't push. But something itched at the back of his neck, that old instinct that had kept him alive for 40 years. And yet even then, even with the signs, he didn't see it. Because how could he? You don't spend 6 years beside someone, 6 birthdays, 6 Christmases, 6 Sunday dinners, and suddenly think, he's not real. That kind of betrayal, it doesn't exist in the world Lefty grew up in. Or at least, it shouldn't. A couple nights later, they were at Lefty's apartment, late, just the two of them. Lefty was watching boxing on the little TV in the corner, volume low, cigarette burning in the ashtray. Donnie was pacing, couldn't sit still. "You ever think about getting out?" he asked suddenly. Lefty looked at him. "Out?" "Yeah, like walking away, just disappearing." Lefty chuckled. "You don't walk away from this life, Donnie. You fade from it, or it buries you." Donnie sat on the edge of the chair, rubbing his hands together. "You never thought about it?" Lefty didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You know what I wanted when I was your age?" Donnie looked up. "I wanted to be respected, that's it. Not rich, not feared. Just respected." He leaned back, his voice lower now. "I wanted guys to say, 'That's Lefty. You don't cross him. You don't forget him.'" Donnie didn't say anything, just nodded once. Lefty turned back to the TV. The fight was over. One guy was bleeding from his nose, trying to smile through it. Donnie stood up. "I gotta go." Lefty glanced at the clock. "You got a date or something?" "No, just gotta handle something." "You coming by tomorrow?" Donnie hesitated, then said, "Maybe. Depends." Lefty looked at him then, really looked, and for just a flicker, less than a second, he saw it. Not guilt, not fear, something colder, finality. But he brushed it off, didn't want to believe it, didn't let himself believe it. "All right," Lefty said, trying to sound casual. "Be safe." Donnie nodded, opened the door, paused, then turned back. And this was the part that haunted Lefty most in the years after. the moment, right before Donnie walked out that door for good. He said, "You ever think about what we'd be if we met in another life?" Lefty blinked. What the hell does that mean? But Donnie just smiled, soft, sad, and said, "Nothing. Never mind." And then he left. Lefty never saw him again. 3 days later, the news broke. Donnie Brasco wasn't Donnie Brasco. He was Special Agent Joseph D. Pistone, Federal Bureau of Investigation. And just like that, the whole world flipped. The tapes, the surveillance, the deals, the crimes, 6 years of undercover work, thousands of hours, dozens of arrests. The Bonanno family was cracked down the middle, and Benjamin Ruggiero, wise guy, soldier, made man, had unknowingly welcomed the government into their sacred circle. He'd trained him, fed him, defended him. He'd told Donnie things no outsider had ever heard, things he'd never even said to his own son. And Donnie? He'd recorded it all. Lefty didn't speak for 2 days, didn't leave the apartment, didn't answer the phone, didn't eat. He just sat by the window, looking out at the street, replaying every moment, every laugh, every ride in the car. The birthday present, the dinners, the way Donnie used to call him Pop sometimes, just to mess around. It wasn't just betrayal, it was violation. And worse, it was real. Because Lefty hadn't faked it. He hadn't been running a con. He'd meant it. He'd loved the kid, in his own way. And now, he didn't even know who he was talking to that whole time. Was it ever real? Was any of it real? He didn't have the answers. Still doesn't. Maybe Donnie had feelings. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he felt guilt. Or maybe it was just another case file. All Lefty knew was that when Donnie walked out that door, he took a piece of Lefty with him and never gave it back. He was summoned to see Sonny the next week. You know how that went already. He thought it was his time. He welcomed it. But they let him walk. No bullets, no burial, just exile. That kind of mercy. It cuts deeper than death, because death ends it. Mercy makes you live with it. Every day. Years later, when Joe Pistone called, Lefty didn't hang up, didn't scream, didn't cry. He just listened. And then, calmly, he said, "You ever think about what we'd be if we met in another life?" Donnie was silent on the other end. Then softly, "Yeah. What do you think?" "I think we'd be friends." Lefty chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. Too bad this one came first. Then he hung up. And that was the last time they ever spoke. To this day, people still ask who Donnie really was to Lefty. An informant, a fake, a brother. Lefty only ever gave one answer. He was my biggest mistake. And that was the truth. Not because Donnie was a Fed, not because the FBI came crashing down through their world, but because Lefty let himself believe in something. And in that life, that's the one thing you never do. They say every empire dies the same way. Not with war, not with fire, but with rot from the inside. And Lefty saw it firsthand. Long before Donnie was exposed, long before the arrests and the headlines, the cracks were already forming. The Mafia, La Cosa Nostra, our thing. It wasn't built on money, not really. It was built on respect, rules, fear. But by the time the 80s hit, all that was fading. Respect was getting replaced by ego. Rules got tossed out for shortcuts. Fear. Fear didn't last when everyone had a gun and no one had honor. Lefty used to say, back in the day, you had to earn the right to shoot a man. By 1980, any kid with a half ounce of coke and a leather jacket thought he was a gangster. And the old guys, the ones who'd built the streets from the ground up, they were being pushed aside, silently, systematically. Back in the 50s and 60s, a guy like Lefty had power. Not flash, not headlines, but power. When he walked into a room, guys stood straighter. When he sat at a card table, nobody dared cheat. When he gave an order, it got done, no questions. But by the 80s, guys didn't stand anymore. They leaned on drugs, on fast deals, on fantasies of being the next Scarface. They came in with loud cars, louder shirts, and no sense of history. And Lefty? He watched it all. Not with anger, with disgust. He remembered one kid. Name was Frankie D., barely 23. Hair slicked back like he was born in a cologne commercial. Gold chains, tinted sunglasses, Coke spoon hanging off his neck like a medal. Showed up to a sit-down once with chewing gum in his mouth. Didn't even take it out before speaking. Lefty just stared at him. "You disrespect your mother with that mouth too?" he asked flat. Frankie laughed. "Come on, Lefty. Times are different." Lefty didn't laugh. He didn't say another word either. Just walked out of the meeting. He knew then the life he knew was gone. The kids weren't built for the long game. They wanted now. They wanted more. And they didn't care who bled for it. It wasn't just the young guys either. The bosses were changing, the old dons. They were quiet men, smart, cold, sure but precise. They handled beefs with sit-downs, not shootouts. But now you had captains running crews like street gangs. You had decisions being made in diners, on cocaine highs, by guys who didn't know the name of the man who stood before them. The books were being opened too fast. Guys were getting made who hadn't earned it. Back in Lefty's day, getting your button meant something. It was sacred. You had to prove loyalty, take risks, get your hands dirty, not once but again and again. Now, a guy sells dope for 2 years, and suddenly he's a made man. It made Lefty sick. He'd bled for this thing, served time for it, buried friends because of it. And now, it felt like a carnival, a parody of what it once was. One day in early '81, before the Donnie fallout, Lefty met with another old-timer, Tony M. Tony had once run the docks in Red Hook. Real man, quiet, didn't smile much. They met at a bakery, shared an espresso, talked about the new generation. Tony stirred his drink, shaking his head. "You see that kid Mikey C?" he asked. Lefty nodded. "The loud one with the Camaro? Shot a guy in broad daylight, in front of a fucking playground." Lefty cursed under his breath. "Why?" he asked. Tony shrugged. "Didn't like the way the guy looked at him." Lefty rubbed his temples. "You'd think these kids were raised in cages." Tony leaned in, voice low. "They weren't raised at all. And that was it. No solution, no strategy. Just 2 old soldiers watching their army fall apart." The drugs didn't help either. For a long time, the Mafia kept heroin at arm's length. Some families dealt, others stayed away. But as the money grew, so did the temptation. By the '80s, everybody was touching it, even the ones who claimed they weren't. Lefty hated heroin, not because of the money, because of Tommy. His boy was proof of what it did. So Lefty stayed away from dope, even refused to be in the room when deals were made. "I don't touch that poison," he said once, "and if you do, don't shake my hand." But that stance, it made him a dinosaur. The new guys didn't care. Heroin brought in big money, fast money, and they figured, why play the long game when you could make $1 million in 6 months? Who cares about loyalty when you're high and rich and untouchable? But no one's untouchable. That's the lesson they all forget. And Lefty watched, one by one, as these loud, drug-fueled gangsters got pinched, flipped, disappeared. Because that was the other cancer spreading through the life. Rats. Back in the day, a rat was rare, feared, hated, and when he got caught, he didn't get a second chance. You find out someone talked, they disappeared. That was the code. No paperwork, no trial, just gone. But now? Now rats were everywhere. The feds had cracked the code. Offer a guy less time, maybe protection, a new life, and he'd tell you everything. Names, dates, drop spots, where the bodies were buried, literally. Lefty couldn't believe it. Guys who swore on their mother's grave were flipping faster than pancakes. Even bosses were turning. Old-timers, men Lefty respected. And for what? To live out their years in Arizona under fake names, working at car washes? Lefty said once, "If you flip, you're already dead, just waiting to lie down." But that didn't stop them. It just made him more alone, more bitter, more convinced that everything he fought for was now dust. And in that dust, he found himself forgotten, not just by the life, by the world. Nobody called, nobody checked in. The new crews didn't ask for his advice, didn't need his approval. Some didn't even know who he was. Once, he went to a funeral for a guy he used to run with. Just stood at the back, coat buttoned tight, hands in his pockets. A young kid walked up, didn't recognize him, said, "You knew Charlie?" Lefty nodded. The kid asked, "You a friend of the family?" Lefty looked him in the eyes. "I am the family," he said, and walked out. That night, he sat by his window, smoked half a pack, and watched the lights flicker across the city. He thought about the code, about what it used to mean, what it was supposed to protect, and how they'd all let it fall apart, not because they had to, but because it was easier. Easier to make fast money, easier to betray, easier to forget. He didn't cry. Lefty didn't cry, not even when his wife died. But that night, something broke in his chest, not loud, just a quiet snap, like the sound of a name being erased from history. In his notebook that night, he wrote only one word: extinct. It wasn't the first time they came for him, but it was the last. July 30th, 1981, late morning, hot air pressing down like a punishment. Lefty was sitting at his small kitchen table in Brooklyn, same place he always sat, stirring coffee that had already gone cold. He was wearing a white tank top, a pair of wrinkled slacks. His pinky ring sat heavy on his hand like it still meant something. The TV buzzed in the background, news anchors talking about inflation, crime, summer heat. He barely heard it. The knock came soft, then louder. He knew before he even opened the door. Feds don't knock like neighbors. They knock like they already own the place. He opened up. 3 men in plain clothes stood there, 2 white, 1 black, all with hard eyes and tired faces. One of them, the taller one, flipped a badge. "Benjamin Ruggiero?" Lefty nodded once. "You're under arrest." He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just stepped aside. "Mind if I finish my coffee?" he asked. The agents looked at each other. The lead one shrugged. "You've got 60 seconds. Lefty went back to the table, took a slow sip, then stood up. He didn't grab a bag. Didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't try to run. He knew the game. He'd played it for decades. Now it was just his turn to lose. The charges weren't pretty. Conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, illegal gambling, loan sharking, RICO violations, the whole alphabet soup. And worse, the indictment named him specifically as a close associate and enabler of Donnie Brasco, the undercover FBI agent who'd infiltrated the Bonanno family. Lefty was, in the eyes of the government, the key to the entire operation. They painted him as the gatekeeper, the old-school soldier who'd let the Fed into the house without checking his shoes. He wasn't just another mobster. He was the one who let it happen. And now, they wanted to bury him for it, not just to punish, but to make an example. You open the door to the government, you don't just pay, you vanish. They put him in MCC, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, the federal jail down in Manhattan, gray walls, heavy doors, fluorescent lights that never slept. He shared a cell with a guy named Rocco, small-time drug dealer from Jersey, always twitching, always talking. Lefty didn't talk. He sat on his bunk, stared at the peeling paint, and thought about the old days. Sometimes Rocco would try to strike up a conversation. "Hey, you're that guy, right? The one from the papers? The rat guy?" Lefty would slowly turn his head, stare at him long enough for the kid to shut up, then go back to silence. He didn't like talking about Donnie in there. Didn't like hearing his name at all. Because even now, even after everything, it still meant something to him. It still hurt. A week into holding, they brought him into an interview room. Clean table, 2 chairs, tape recorder sitting in the middle like a coiled snake. 2 FBI agents sat across from him. One young, fresh suit, smelled like aftershave and ambition. The other, older, bald, worn face, a little sympathy behind the eyes. The older one spoke first. "Ben, mind if I call you Ben?" Lefty didn't answer. The younger one jumped in. "We're not here to fight. We're here to talk." Still nothing. "You're looking at 20 years, maybe more. You're 70 already. You really want to die behind a fence?" Lefty finally leaned back in his chair. You done? The young one glanced at his partner, then continued. Look, we know you didn't know Donnie was a Fed. That's not what this is about. What it's about is helping us understand who else did. Lefty smiled, a cold, tired curve of the lips. You mean you want me to rat? No, the older one said. We want you to cooperate, share what you know, help us clean this thing up. Lefty leaned forward, put both hands on the table. You want me to betray the only thing I've got left, he said softly. A name. The young one looked annoyed. You betrayed yourself when you vouched for a federal agent. Lefty's eyes locked with his. You think I don't know that? Silence. You think I haven't played every second of that mistake in my head for the last goddamn year? He went on. I made the call. I let him in. And yeah, that's on me. He sat back again. But I'll be dead before I give you anyone else. The older agent sighed. You're loyal. I get it. No, Lefty corrected. I'm principled. That's different. They left him alone after that. Didn't call him back. Didn't press. They knew when a man had already made peace with dying. The court date came 2 months later. Federal courtroom. Cold. Marble everywhere. A judge with half-moon glasses and a face like concrete. They offered Lefty a deal. 15 years if he pled guilty. They'd skip the trial. Make it quiet. Lefty asked one question. You taken down anybody else with this deal? No, said his court-appointed lawyer. Just you. He signed the paper. Didn't even read it. As he walked out of the courtroom in shackles, a reporter shouted, Hey, Lefty, you regret it? Trusting Donnie? Lefty didn't stop walking, but he did say one thing. I regret trusting anybody. They sent him to FCI Springfield, a federal prison with a medical center. His health was slipping, lung trouble, high blood pressure, old bullet wounds that never really healed right. The doctor told him, You don't have many years left. Lefty smiled. Wasn't planning to use them anyway. His cell was small but clean. He had a window, bars across it, but still it was something. He could see the trees, the sky, sometimes birds. He liked the birds. They didn't talk. They didn't judge. They just flew, came back, flew again. That kind of freedom. It didn't exist for men like him, not anymore. Other inmates respected him, not because of what he did, but because of what he didn't do. He didn't flip, didn't talk, didn't cry. That meant something, even in a world where honor had become a joke. You'd see young guys watching him in the yard, like they were trying to figure out what made him tick. He didn't say much, but once, one of them asked, Why didn't you turn, man? They were offering you a deal. Lefty looked at him and said, Because there's 2 kinds of time in here, the kind you serve with shame and the kind you serve standing up. And he left it at that. He wrote letters while inside, not to anyone in particular, just thoughts, sentences, fragments. He'd write them on paper and fold them into the lining of his mattress, like he was building a book no one would ever read. One of those letters went like this. If I die in here, it won't be because of the system. It'll be because I gave my life to a code that forgot me. But I don't blame the code. I blame the men who let it rot. And maybe I was one of them. He never mailed it. He didn't have to. Some truths ain't for sharing. They're for dying with. Then came a letter from Tommy. Found him in his cell one morning. Folded neat. No return address. Inside, just 3 lines. Still clean. Had a boy last month. Named him Anthony. Lefty held the paper like it was glass. Didn't cry, didn't smile. He just folded it back up, put it under his pillow, and whispered, Don't make him into me. In the winter of '94, Lefty got parole. They said his health was bad enough, that he wasn't a threat anymore, that he could go. He didn't argue, didn't thank them. Just packed his small box of things, a Bible, a toothbrush, 2 letters, and walked out the gates like a man leaving a tomb. They said freedom. But it felt more like exile. He was free. But there was nothing left for him out there. No crew, no neighborhood, no name that carried weight. Just a city that moved on, and a past that never did. Ghosts never knock. The prison gates didn't creak. They just clicked open, quiet, efficient. Lefty stepped through with a cardboard box in one hand and a manila envelope under his arm. The envelope had his release papers, his medication, and a bus voucher worth exactly $19. No one was waiting on the other side. No camera crews, no friends, not even a cab. He stood there for a minute, breathing in air that didn't smell like bleach and metal. It was cold, sharp, October. The kind of cold that goes straight to the bones, especially bones like his, old and cracked from a lifetime of punches and prison mattresses. He didn't look back. He just walked, slow, like a man with nowhere to be and all the time in the world to get there. He took the bus to the Bronx. The voucher barely covered it, sat near the back, stared out the window the whole ride. The city hadn't changed. It had mutated. Giant billboards covered buildings that used to be Italian bakeries and corner fruit stands. Teenagers wore headphones the size of bricks. Graffiti climbed over train cars like vines with anger in their roots. The Bronx wasn't home, but it was close enough to what used to be. He rented a room in a building that smelled like mold and cheap cleaner. 4th floor, no elevator. The landlord didn't ask questions, just took the money. Lefty appreciated that. The room had a twin bed, a hot plate, and a rust-stained sink. The heater rattled when it worked, which wasn't often. There was a window, small, faced a brick wall, perfect. Lefty unpacked, set the old alarm clock by the bed, even though he didn't care about time anymore. He sat on the edge of the mattress, listened to the city hum through the cracks, and whispered to himself, "So this is it." Days passed slow. He got up early, not because he had anywhere to be, just because the habit of rising before the noise had never left him. He made weak coffee on the hot plate, smoked half a cigarette, coughed, wrote one word in his notebook each morning. Day 1, breathe. Day 2, ache. Day 3, gone. He didn't write stories, just single words. They said more than he could stand to explain. Sometimes he walked to the bodega 2 blocks away, bought a paper, skimmed the front page, avoided the obituaries. The owner, Hector, was friendly. Too friendly. "Good morning, Mr. Ben. Weather's nice, huh?" Lefty would nod. Pay in cash, always exact change. Never spoke unless he had to. He wasn't rude, just removed. Hector thought he was a retired teacher, maybe military. Didn't ask, didn't need to know. And Lefty didn't volunteer. The only thing he'd ever given up willingly was time. He got a letter 1 week after moving in. No return address, just his name in tight handwriting, all caps. Inside was a photo, black and white, a baby, wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide, looking off into nothing. On the back, one line. "His name is Anthony. You're a grandfather." No signature, but he didn't need one. Lefty stared at that photo for an hour, didn't move, didn't blink much, just sat there holding it, like the ink might smudge if he breathed wrong. Then he took out his notebook and wrote 2 words. "Still mine." He put the photo in a shoebox under the bed, next to his letters, next to the pinky ring he hadn't worn since the day he walked out of court in shackles. Some nights he dreamed of the old club, the laughter, the smell of fresh bread and gun oil, the warmth of being somebody. He'd wake up sweating, confused, reaching for a gun that wasn't there. Other nights, he dreamed of Donnie, never his face, just the voice. That smooth, calm, fake loyalty. In the dream, Donnie would say, "You should have known." And Lefty would wake up whispering, "I did know. I just didn't want it to be true." He didn't drink anymore. Didn't have the stomach for it. Didn't have the forgiveness for it. He needed to remember everything now, even the parts that hurt the most, because they were all he had left. Then came the knock. Soft. 3 times. Lefty froze. He hadn't had visitors, not once, not even Tommy. They'd written, but no visits. He looked through the peephole. A man, tall, mid-50s, wearing a navy blue coat, hat pulled low. Lefty opened the door a few inches, chain still on. "You lost?" he asked. The man looked up, and Lefty's breath caught. It had been decades, but that face, older, thinner, but still the same eyes. Joe, Donnie, whatever the hell he was now. Lefty closed the door, undid the chain, opened it all the way. They stared at each other, no words, just the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Joe took off his hat. "I didn't think you'd open the door." Lefty stepped aside. "I almost didn't." Joe walked in, looked around. "This place, it's small." "Fits me just fine," Lefty said. Joe nodded, sat in the only chair. Lefty stayed standing. "So, what now?" he asked. Joe ran a hand over his face. "I don't know. I needed to see you." "Why?" "I've spent 20 years wondering if you'd ever forgive me." Lefty lit a cigarette, inhaled, exhaled slow. "I told you before," he said. "I don't forgive you." Joe looked down. "But I don't hate you either." Joe looked up, and in that moment, for the first time, Lefty saw it. Guilt. Real guilt. Not the kind you wear for court, the kind that buries itself behind the eyes. Lefty sat on the bed. "You ruined my life," he said, "but you also gave me back my soul." Joe furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" Lefty leaned forward. "I was dead long before I met you. Cold. Hollow. You came in like a mirror, showed me what I lost." Joe swallowed. "I never wanted it to go down like that. But it did." Silence. Then Joe reached into his coat, pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I brought this," he said. "I kept it." He placed it on the table. Lefty opened it. Inside, a gold chain. His old one. The one Donnie had given him for Christmas back in '79. He held it up. The light caught the links. "I thought this was gone." "I kept it," Joe said quietly. "Didn't have the heart to throw it away." Lefty stared at it, then slowly placed it on the table. "Thanks." More silence. Then Joe stood. "I should go." Lefty nodded. Joe turned to the door, paused. "Do you ever think about what we were?" Lefty looked at him. "Yeah," he said. "We were real in a fake world. That's the tragedy." Joe said nothing, just put his hat back on, walked out. Lefty watched the door for a while after it closed. Then he picked up the chain, and for the first time in years, he smiled. That night he didn't write one word. He wrote a sentence. "Even ghosts deserve a goodbye." A name at the end. The visit from Joe, Donnie, whatever name he carried now, changed something. Not everything. Just something small. But when you're Lefty's age, small things matter. A new sound. A soft memory. The shape of a handshake you never thought would happen again. After Joe left, Lefty sat in silence for hours. Didn't eat, didn't smoke. Just sat on the bed, the chain Joe gave back still resting on the table, catching what little sunlight pushed through the grimy window. He hadn't worn it in over 20 years. But there it was, untarnished, whole, like it remembered who he used to be even when the world didn't. He thought about putting it on, but instead, he slid it gently into the shoebox under his bed, next to the photo of his grandson, the folded court letters, and the pinky ring that never left the bottom corner. A box full of past lives. That's all it was now. The days blurred, the kind of blur that feels soft, not cruel. Lefty spent mornings sitting by the window, not reading, not writing, just watching the pigeons fight over crumbs on the ledge. They reminded him of the old days, guys picking over territory, scraps, territory that meant more in ego than in value. He used to laugh at it. Now he just watched, didn't even shoo them away. He barely went outside anymore, not because he couldn't, but because he didn't belong out there. The city had changed. The people moved faster, talked louder, dressed stranger. Everything was bright now. Screens, ads, faces. No one looked you in the eye. That used to mean something. Eye contact. A man's word was in his stare. Now, all gone. So he stayed in. Wrote his one word each day. November 3rd. Empty. November 4th. Enough. November 5th. Echo. Then came the cough. Deep. Wet. Started slow, just in the mornings. Then more often. Harder. Worse. He tried to ignore it. He'd ignored pain his whole life. Broken ribs, split lips, fractured knuckles. But this was different. It didn't bruise. It spread. By December, he couldn't sleep flat. Had to prop himself up with pillows just to keep from choking. The heat stopped working, so he wrapped himself in 3 jackets and a blanket. Still shivered. He finally went to the free clinic on 187th and Webster. Sat in the waiting room between 2 screaming toddlers and a guy with a knife scar that looked fresh. The nurse called his name. He shuffled back. Old lungs, old heart, old story. The doctor was kind, young, maybe 30. Looked at his chart, then at Lefty. "Mr. Ruggiero, how long have you had this cough?" Lefty shrugged. "Few months? Maybe a year. Lost track." "You smoke?" Lefty smirked. "Is that a real question?" The doctor tried to smile but couldn't. "Have you ever been diagnosed with any pulmonary conditions?" "No. Spent most of my life trying not to get diagnosed with anything. They ran tests, x-rays, took blood. A week later the results came in. Stage 4 lung cancer, spread to the lymph nodes, maybe 6 months, maybe less." Lefty took the news the same way he took prison time, death orders, and betrayal, with a nod and silence. The doctor asked if he wanted treatment, chemo, radiation, anything to prolong. Lefty looked at him and said, "Kid, I've been dying since 1943. I just didn't know when it'd catch up." He walked out of the clinic, didn't look back. That night, he didn't write in the notebook. He just sat with it open. And for the first time, he considered tearing a page out, taking something back, unwriting a moment, but he didn't. Instead, he lit a cigarette. Even with the pain, even knowing what it meant, he smoked slow, carefully, like he owed it to himself to feel the sting. Then, at the bottom of the page, he wrote, "Good." 2 weeks later, he got another letter. Same tight handwriting, same no-name envelope. Inside, a photo of a young boy, around 5. Dark eyes, wide smile. Underneath, a note. "Anthony started school this year. He's smart. He looks like his grandmother. Tommy's been clean 10 years. He owns a tire shop now. Married, stable. We haven't told Anthony about you, but maybe one day we will. I just wanted you to know. He's good. We're good. Still no signature." Didn't need one. Lefty held the photo in both hands, carefully, like it might turn to ash. He closed his eyes. Could almost see Angela's face in the boy. Something in the chin, the shape of the brow. And maybe, just maybe, a little of him too. He opened his notebook, wrote just 1 sentence. "I didn't leave much, but I left that." He folded the letter, placed it in the shoebox, right on top. He didn't tell anyone about the diagnosis. No point, no visitors, no goodbyes. He told himself that's how it should be. Guys like him weren't meant for dramatic endings. They were meant to fade, quiet, alone. But fate's a funny thing. It never asks for permission. It was the first snowfall of the year, late December. Lefty was in bed, layered in flannel, coughing so hard it shook the bed frame. His skin looked thinner now, hands shaking more. Eyes yellowing. He was drifting in and out of sleep when the buzzer rang. He ignored it. Then again. Buzz. 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 He pulled himself up, grunted his way to the door, checked the buzzer camera. A man in a brown coat, holding a cane. Lefty blinked. Didn't recognize him. He buzzed the door, anyway. A few minutes later, a knock. 3 soft taps. He opened. It was Tony M. from the old days, the man who used to run Red Hook, one of the only old-timers Lefty hadn't buried yet. His face was sunken, hair white, but his eyes, still sharp, still there. They didn't speak, just looked at each other. Then Lefty stepped aside. Tony walked in, looked around the small room. "Jesus, Lefty," he said finally. "You were a prince once." Lefty chuckled. "That was a long time ago." Tony sat slowly. "I heard you weren't doing too good." "I ain't doing it all." Tony nodded, took off his gloves. "I saw Donnie." Lefty raised an eyebrow. "You too?" Tony nodded. "He came to see me. Apologized. Same as you, I guess." Lefty looked away. "Too late for sorry." "Yeah," Tony agreed, "but better late than never." They sat in silence a while. Then Tony said, "You know, you never flipped. Not once." Lefty shrugged. "I didn't flip because I didn't bend. There's a difference." Tony looked at him, real hard. "You ever think we were the last ones?" Lefty didn't answer, because they both already knew. They were relics, statues in a museum that no one visited anymore. But maybe, just maybe, statues could still be respected. Tony stayed an hour. They drank tea, talked about guys long dead, laughed about things that used to be dangerous. Then he stood. Put his coat on. "I won't be back," he said. "I'm moving to Florida. My daughter's making me." Lefty smiled. "Tell her I said good luck." Tony chuckled. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded napkin. Inside was a photo, an old one. Lefty, Tony, Sonny Black, and Donnie, smiling, all arms over shoulders, before the truth. Tony handed it to him. "You ever forget who you were? Look at this." Lefty nodded. Tony walked to the door, paused. "Take care, Lefty." "You too, Tony." And just like that, the last of the old crew was gone. That night, Lefty added one last photo to the box, closed the lid, placed his hand on it, and whispered, "I wasn't a good man, but I wasn't a liar either." And maybe, in the end, that was enough. Tape 1. The only truth I've got left. There's a strange thing that happens when a man knows he's running out of time. Not in some poetic Hollywood way. Not with candles or last words whispered from a hospital bed. No. It's quieter than that. Slower. Creepier, even. You start hearing things. The way the walls breathe. The way your own heartbeat sounds inside your ears at night. And the silence. It gets louder. By January, Lefty knew. This was it. The cough was constant. The pain in his chest came in waves, like someone was wringing his lungs out like wet rags. He was losing weight, fast. Even the pigeons stopped landing on the ledge, and somehow that stung more than he expected. Still, no calls, no visitors. Tommy hadn't written since Christmas. He didn't blame him. What do you say to a father you never really knew? A man you watched fall apart before your 10th birthday? Nothing. You say nothing. And that silence becomes the legacy. But Lefty, he didn't want silence anymore. Not now, not at the end. He didn't want forgiveness, he wanted truth. So he bought a little tape recorder, secondhand $20, came with a fresh cassette and a cracked plastic case. He picked it up from the pawn shop down near Fordham. Guy behind the counter didn't even ask his name. Didn't need to. Old men with tired eyes and nowhere to be don't need reasons to buy old things. Lefty brought it home, wiped it down, loaded the cassette. He stared at it for a long time before pressing record. Then he cleared his throat. And began. Tape 1, January 7th, 1995, 2:12 a.m. If you're hearing this, it means one of two things. Either I'm already dead, or you found this box under my bed and decided to know me for real. I don't know who you are yet. Maybe you're my grandson. Maybe you're just a curious stranger. Maybe you're Tommy, finally wondering who the hell your father really was. Whoever you are, this ain't no confession. It's a story. Mine. The version nobody told. The kind you don't read in papers or FBI reports. The one that got buried under headlines and cold stares. He paused, coughed hard into a rag, then continued. I was born Benjamin Ruggiero in 1926, Little Italy, back when families were bigger than streets and kids played baseball with sticks. My old man was a tailor, hands like bricks, heart like a sponge. Ma was all prayer and soup, died when I was 15. I started running numbers before I could grow a mustache. You think that makes me a criminal? Good. I was. But I was also a loyal man. That word, loyal, it don't mean nothing anymore. Now you say it and people laugh. But back then, it meant you'd bleed for a name. You'd take a charge. You'd bury a friend and not ask why. He lit a cigarette. You could hear the scratch of the match. I got made at 21. Bonanno family. I didn't ask for it. I earned it. And let me tell you something. All these documentaries and books, They get it wrong. They paint us like monsters. Like all we did was kill and steal and break legs. Yeah, we did all that. But we also kept order. We kept balance. You think the city ran clean by itself? Nah. We cleaned it, with blood, sure, but also with rules. He paused again, this time longer. The tape crackled. You could hear sirens outside in the distance. Then came Donnie. You want to know the truth? He was the closest thing I had to a son. I taught him things I didn't even tell my blood. I trusted him with my life, my reputation, my legacy. And he lied. For 6 years. People say I should have seen it. Maybe they're right, but he played it too good, too quiet, too real. And me? I was just tired. Tired of watching my world fade. Tired of these new kids snorting coke and shooting each other in the back over garbage. Donnie was clean, smart. He listened. And you don't understand how rare that is, when a man really listens. So yeah, I let him in, and it cost me everything. The cigarette hissed as it was stubbed out. But here's the part they never print. I don't hate him, not anymore. You spend long enough with ghosts, you start forgiving them just to survive. He visited me, came to my door, years later, said he was sorry. And maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Doesn't matter. He looked like a man who carried my sins, too. And that's more than most ever did. So if you're looking for some kind of vengeance story, you're not going to get it here. Another long pause. Lefty's breath wheezed, but he wasn't finished. They say we're villains, that we poisoned the streets. You know what I say? They replaced us with worse. Now you got politicians who steal more than we ever did, CEOs who ruin lives from glass offices, kids with machine guns and no sense of fear or respect. At least we looked you in the eye when we buried you. Now, it's all rats and wires and deals. He sniffled, coughed again, a rattle this time. I'm not asking for forgiveness, and I'm sure as hell not asking for sympathy. But if you're my blood, if you're Anthony, or even Tommy, he paused, voice soft now. Don't become me. Don't follow ghosts down alleys. Don't wear a name like it'll protect you. It won't. Be your own man. Love hard. Lie less. And when the end comes, a final exhale. Make sure you ain't got no tape recorder hidden under your bed, whispering your regrets into plastic. Live better than I did. Click. End of tape 1. Lefty didn't record another tape that night. He lay back in bed, eyes heavy, lungs burning. The city breathed without him. Traffic, sirens, laughter far away. But for the first time in years, he felt lighter. Not clean, not innocent, just lighter. Like maybe someone, someday, would hear that tape and understand that a man like him wasn't just a gangster. He was a boy from Little Italy who wanted respect, who lost it, and who never stopped carrying the weight. He recorded 5 more tapes before his voice gave out. None of them were polished, none of them were rehearsed, but they were real. Stories about beatings that haunted him, about the first time he killed a man, about Angela and how she made spaghetti on Fridays like it was an art, about the time Tommy cried when Lefty missed his birthday, and Lefty pretended it didn't hurt him, when really it nearly tore his chest open. He told the truth, all of it. Not for fame, not for pity, just so that someone would know he wasn't just the guy who vouched for a Fed. He was Lefty, a man who lived by the code, and died by it too. Anthony opens the box. The Bronx hadn't changed much, still noisy, still cracked and loud and always moving, even when no one had anywhere to go. Anthony Ruggiero had never liked the place, but something in the air made it feel like the city knew him, even if he didn't know it. He stood outside the old building on Arthur Avenue, looking up at the window 4 stories up. He imagined it, his grandfather, maybe sick, maybe already gone, watching the street with a cigarette burning down to the filter. His mother didn't want him coming here. You don't owe that man anything, she'd said. But Tommy, his father, had just sighed. He was what he was, he'd said, but he's still blood. Anthony wasn't there for forgiveness. He didn't even know the man. He only knew of him in shadows and hushed stories in the shape of his last name. But when the call came from the landlord, "Your grandfather passed," He left a box with your name on it. Something in Anthony stirred. Not love. Not grief. Just curiosity. What kind of man leaves a box after a life like that? What could possibly be in it? He climbed the stairs slowly, not from pain, just from caution, like he was stepping into a piece of history that might collapse under him. 4th floor, end of the hall. Peeling green paint. Door, half cracked. No police tape, no mourners. Just silence. The kind that made your skin crawl with questions. The landlord was waiting with a ring of keys. "You're the kid?" he asked. "I guess," Anthony said. "His grandson." The man grunted. "Didn't talk about nobody. Just told me if I go give the box to Anthony Ruggiero. You got ID?" Anthony showed him. The man nodded. "I didn't go in. Smells like smoke. Been a few days." Anthony said nothing. The door creaked open. The apartment was dark, dusty. Smelled like old coffee grounds and ash and something that had been still too long. But it wasn't messy. It was precise. Bed made, table wiped down, a worn Bible on the nightstand, and the shoebox sitting neatly on the middle of the bed, as if Lefty had placed it there moments before death. Anthony stepped inside. The landlord didn't follow, just said, "Take what you want. I'm clearing the place next week." Then he disappeared down the stairs. Anthony didn't move right away. He just stood there staring at the box. It wasn't big. Old, maybe once for boots. Duct tape across the lid, faded writing on top. "Anthony, for when I'm gone." He sat on the edge of the bed and slowly peeled the tape. Inside, a photo of a baby, himself, he assumed. A photo of his father as a teenager, skinny and tired. A gold chain, resting carefully in tissue paper. A pinky ring, scratched and faded. A handful of letters, folded and labeled by date. A notebook, leather-bound and full. And at the bottom, a cassette recorder with 6 labeled tapes. Anthony blinked. Tapes? He pulled them out one by one. On each, in the same scratchy handwriting, Tape 1, Me Tape 2, Donnie Tape 3, Family Tape 4, The Code Tape 5, The End Tape 6, for you. Anthony's hands trembled. He hadn't expected this. Not a voice, not a message, not this much of the man. He looked around the room again, suddenly feeling like a stranger in someone else's unfinished sentence. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out an old Walkman his dad used for listening to Springsteen cassettes in the garage. He popped in Tape 1, pressed play. Lefty's voice filled the room. Dry, gravelly, tired, but steady. Confident in a way that made Anthony sit a little straighter. If you're hearing this, it means one of 2 things. Anthony listened to every word, every damn word. He sat there as the room around him dissolved, as the stories unfolded, as the truth came crawling out of the speaker like smoke. The photos in the box made sense now. The chain, the ring, even the silence his father carried for so long. Lefty didn't beg for forgiveness. He didn't lie. He didn't try to come off like a victim. He just told the truth. And as the voice continued, Anthony found himself feeling something he never expected. Pity. This wasn't a monster. This wasn't some legend from FBI files or Netflix shows. This was a man, a flawed one. But a man who never stopped trying to hold on to something real in a world that twisted loyalty into poison. He listened to all 6 tapes, every hour, didn't eat, didn't move, just sat on that stiff mattress while the past poured out like confession. By the final tape, Lefty's voice was weaker, but his message was sharper than ever. I know I'm not going to be remembered right, but if you're listening and you're mine, know this, I didn't live clean, but I died honest. And in this life, that's the best some of us ever get. When the final tape clicked off, Anthony sat there in silence. The real kind. The kind that doesn't need music or noise to prove something happened. He picked up the chain, felt the weight of it, then set it gently on the table. He opened the notebook, page after page of single words. Ache, loyal, smoke, forgive, echo, enough, name. On the final page, Anthony, live clean, be better, but don't ever forget me. Tears welled up in Anthony's eyes, not for the man Lefty had been, but for the man he could have been. The one who reached out across death with a shoebox and a voice. He gathered everything carefully, took the box, the tapes, the photos, left the apartment just as the sun was starting to set over the Bronx skyline. At the top of the stairs, he turned back, looked once more at the doorway, then whispered, "I won't forget you." And he meant it. The blood that doesn't wash. After Anthony walked out of that apartment, box in hand, he didn't go straight home, didn't go back to the wife, didn't go see his father. He drove, nowhere in particular, through the Bronx, down into Manhattan, over the bridges and under train lines that rumbled like old gods waking up. He drove with the window down and the box on the passenger seat, the gold chain in his coat pocket, the tapes back in their case, and a cigarette between his fingers. Even though he hadn't smoked in years, he didn't light it, just held it, the same way a man might hold a bullet he's not sure he's ready to use. That night, when he got back to his house in Yonkers, the place was dark. His wife was asleep. Their son, just 3 years old, snored gently through the baby monitor. Anthony stood in the garage for an hour, staring at the shoebox. He opened it, touched each thing again, looked at the notebook, ran his fingers over the word name, scribbled on the second-to-last page. He thought about everything Lefty said in the tapes, not just the crimes. Not the betrayals, but the loneliness, the silence, the hunger for something real in a world where everything had a price. And for the first time since holding that box, Anthony felt proud, not of what Lefty did, but of what he endured, of the way he died standing, not clean but honest. A man who never gave up names, even when his own was dirt. The chain still sat heavy in his coat pocket. He took it out, held it under the garage light. The gold looked dull now, worn down, but still intact, still whole, like something that had survived fire. He put it around his neck, and for the first time, it fit. Not because he wanted to be a gangster, not because he wanted to carry Lefty's sins, but because he wanted to remember. And sometimes remembering is a kind of redemption. The next day, Anthony called his father. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah?" "I found the box." Silence. "You opened it?" "Yeah." More silence. "He recorded tapes," Anthony said. "Yeah." Tommy's voice cracked. "He told me he might. He left them for me." Tommy didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, "I didn't want you to grow up with all that weight. I think I had it anyway." Another long pause. Then Tommy said, "Was he angry?" "No, not at the end." Tommy exhaled like a man letting go of something he'd carried for too long. "I'm glad." There was a stillness between them now, not empty, but full, like two men who had both finally opened the same door. "I want to come by," Anthony said. "Play the tapes, together." "I'd like that." That weekend, Anthony sat with his father in the small living room of Tommy's house, a modest place in Jersey, with too many family pictures and a smell of fresh carpet cleaner. Tommy had aged, gray in the beard, bags under his eyes, but his hands were steady, clear, not shaking like they used to. They sat across from each other, tapes on the coffee table, Walkman between them, hooked up to small speakers. Anthony hit play. And for the first time since Lefty was arrested, father and son heard his voice together. The effect was immediate. Tommy sat straighter, looked away, wiped his eyes when he thought Anthony wasn't watching. When Lefty talked about Angela, Tommy's mother, about how he missed Friday dinners and the way she lit candles even when there was nothing to celebrate, Tommy put his hand to his mouth and shook his head. "I forgot her voice," he said softly, "but now I can hear it again, through him." They listened to all 6 tapes. No breaks, no interruptions. At the end, Tommy reached over, touched the pinky ring, turned it in his hand. "He wore this when I was a kid," he said. "Used to catch the light when he'd point at me. Scared the hell out of me. But I always thought it looked strong." Anthony nodded. "He didn't want you to become him." "I didn't," Tommy said. "But I didn't become much of anything else either." "You raised me," Anthony said. Tommy blinked. "Yeah, I guess I did." They sat together in silence after that. Not the kind that felt heavy, the kind that meant something had finally settled, that some part of the past had been seen. A few weeks later, Anthony started writing. Not a book, not a screenplay, just truth. Fragments of what Lefty said, pieces of what he didn't, reflections on blood, legacy, identity. He didn't plan to publish it. Didn't even know if he wanted anyone to read it, but he wrote like it mattered, like putting it down was the only way to keep it from bleeding into everything else. He called the file The Man Before Me. Not the mobster, not the betrayed, just the man. Because that's what he'd learned most of all, that behind every story, every headline, every whispered name in the streets, there was a man. And Lefty, for all his sins, had been one until the end. One spring afternoon, Anthony took his son, a bright, curious boy with quiet eyes, down to Little Italy. They walked through Mulberry Street, past the tourists, past the overpriced cannoli shops, past the place where the old club used to be, now a souvenir store. He pointed to the corner. Your great-grandfather used to sit right there. Said the light was just right for cards. His son looked up. Was he a good man? Anthony thought about it, then said, he was a real man. And that's not always the same thing, but it's worth remembering. His son nodded, the way kids do when they don't fully understand, but trust you anyway. They bought a slice, sat on a bench, watched pigeons peck at crumbs by the curb. Anthony pulled the gold chain out from under his shirt and let it rest on his chest. His son pointed. Who gave you that? Someone who made a lot of mistakes, but wanted me to make less. Oh, the boy said, then smiled. I think you're doing okay. And just like that, Anthony knew Lefty's story didn't end in that apartment. It was here now, not in the crime, not in the tapes, but in this moment. A name passed down, but not repeated. A bloodline that didn't have to bleed anymore. It was a small funeral, barely 10 people, no black limousines, no procession, just a wooden urn on a plain table, the kind you rent by the hour from a church that's been doing quiet farewells for too long. The name on the table read, Anthony Ruggiero, 1969, 2038, beloved husband, father, grandfather. The room smelled like old candles and fresh lilies. A light rain tapped on the church windows, gentle, steady. Like the sky had decided it was time to cry too. No one there mentioned the word mob. No one talked about tapes. No one brought up Benjamin Lefty Ruggiero, not in words. But he was there. In the chain around the neck of a quiet, gray-haired man standing in the back. In the posture of the teenage boy seated next to the casket, tall, alert, like someone who'd grown up carrying something older than himself. That boy was Anthony's grandson. His name was Ben, not by accident. After the service ended, most of the guests trickled outside. Cousins, old neighbors, friends from Anthony's neighborhood. His wife had passed 5 years earlier. His son, Michael, was now a grandfather himself. Only Ben stayed behind, staring at the urn like it might still offer him one more answer. He held the same box Anthony had received all those years ago. It was worn now, the corners frayed, the duct tape brittle, but it had been kept safe. Inside, the chain, the pinky ring, the notebook, and 5 of the 6 original tapes. One was missing, the last one, for you. That one had never left Anthony's study. It had disappeared the week before Anthony's own death, never found, never replaced. But Ben had heard the others, listened to them like they were sacred scripture, not because he believed in crime stories or romanticized old gangsters, but because he knew how heavy silence could be if no one tried to translate it. And now, after burying his grandfather, he was the last one who knew, not just the story, but the man inside it. Later that night, Ben sat in his apartment in Brooklyn. He'd moved into a small flat above a cafe in Bensonhurst. Felt like the old neighborhood, even if it wasn't anymore. His girlfriend was asleep in the next room. He sat alone with the box, the tapes spread out on the table. The gold chain now hung from a small frame on the wall. Not worn, not hidden, just there, like a witness. Ben had spent most of his 20s chasing the ghost of a man he'd never met. He'd read every file, found old articles. Even met Donnie Brasco once, in a quiet corner of a Florida book signing, under a different name. Ben never told him who he was, just listened, watched, measured the weight of a man who'd broken open a world and walked away untouched. Afterward, Ben wrote in his journal, "He looks like someone who carries too many doors with no keys." But tonight, Ben wasn't thinking about Donnie, or even Anthony. He was thinking about what's left after the story ends, what survives, what matters. He played tape 2 again, the one about Donnie. Lefty's voice crackled through the small speaker, weaker now, warped a little from age. "He was the last man I ever trusted," Lefty said, coughing through the middle of it, "and I didn't even know his real name. Funny, ain't it? I spent my life judging men on how they said their names. What neighborhood they came from, who vouched for who, and I missed the Fed standing right next to me. But it wasn't that he lied that hurt the most, it was that I wanted him to be real, that I needed him to be. He saw me, not Lefty, not the wise guy, just Ben, the tired old man who wanted something more than blood and books full of names to remember." Ben turned off the tape, sat in silence, looked out the window. Across the street, a group of teenagers leaned on a stoop, laughing, sharing a vape, punching each other's shoulders with lazy affection. He wondered if they'd ever heard the name Lefty, or if, like most, they only knew him through a crime podcast, a line in a movie script, or some grainy clip in a documentary. He almost hoped they hadn't, because the man in those stories wasn't the one on those tapes. Ben finally opened the notebook, the same one his grandfather had written in. Single words, one per page. He flipped through them slowly. Ache, loyal, Donnie, smoke, guilt, quiet, forgive, Anthony, echo, cough, penance, name. Then the last word on the final page, written in shakier handwriting, Ben. No explanation, just the name. Ben stared at it for a long time. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just whispered to no one, "I heard you." A week later, Ben mailed a package. It went to a historical archive in New York, one that focused on organized crime, law enforcement history, and oral testimony. Inside the package, 5 cassette tapes, a digitized transcript of each. A short note that read, "This voice is not a confession, it's a reckoning." His name was Benjamin Ruggiero, and he wasn't who you think. Ben didn't leave his name, didn't want credit, didn't want attention. He just wanted the world to have the real version of the man, not the mugshot, not the press releases, the voice, the raw, crackling, tired, real voice of a man who had nothing left to lose and still chose to tell the truth. He kept the pinky ring, put it in a drawer in his desk. Maybe one day he'd pass it down, maybe not. Some legacies are meant to continue, others are meant to stop. But remembering doesn't mean repeating. And Ben, he remembered everything. He remembered that silence can kill, that loyalty without love is just a leash, that codes, once broken, only leave scars, and that even the worst men can die trying to be better. On the anniversary of Lefty's death, Ben walked to the edge of the East River. Same spot where Lefty once stood during one of his long walks after prison. The benches were new, the skyline taller, but the wind was the same, sharp, honest, unfiltered. Ben took out a piece of paper. One sentence, handwritten. He died standing. Let that be enough. He folded it, put it inside a small glass jar, sealed the lid. Then he tossed it into the water, didn't wait to watch where it went, didn't make a wish, didn't say a prayer, just walked away. And behind him, the river took the words, took them far. And maybe someday someone would find them. Or maybe not. Either way, Lefty Ruggiero would never be fully forgotten again. The tape clicked on one last time. The 6th one, the one labeled "For You." The one Anthony never let anyone else hear. The one that vanished the week he died. But what no one knew was that Anthony never lost it. He kept it in a safe, alone, separate from the others, not because it was dangerous, but because it was sacred. It wasn't meant for the public. wasn't meant for FBI archives or curious historians. It was meant for family, for one set of ears. And now, decades later, it sat inside a small private vault Ben had opened with a single key left in a safety deposit box. A note attached. When you're old enough. When you understand. Not before. Ben sat in the quiet of his apartment. The street outside buzzed softly, rain against concrete, the occasional honk, distant trains rolling by. He placed the tape in an old refurbished cassette player, hit record on his phone, then play on the tape. And there it was, Lefty's voice, gravelly, calm, slower than ever, but clear. If you're listening to this, then I'm long gone. If Anthony didn't burn it, it means he trusted you. That's more than I gave most people. Lefty chuckled softly, a hollow sound, more tired than amused. I don't know your face, don't know your voice, don't even know your name, but I know what you are. You're my blood, and that means whether you like it or not, you carry part of me, not the crimes, not the name, not the reputation. You carry the weight of silence, the weight of stories people whisper but never say out loud. Let me make one thing clear right now. You don't owe me anything, not respect, not grief, not a visit to my grave. Hell, they probably dumped me in the cheapest box they had. No marker, no headline, just a whisper. But if you've made it this far, if you've sat through the other tapes, the notebook, the photos, then maybe you deserve one last truth. I wasn't made for this world. He paused. Long silence. You could hear the sound of an old radiator hissing in the background. A bird outside the window. Then his voice again. I was made for a world where a handshake meant something, where a man's name was a shield, not a target. But that world died before I did. And for a long time, I thought dying with it would be a kind of honor, like going down with your ship. But in the end, I just went down alone. You could hear him cough, weaker than before, almost like a breath running out of rope. I made a lot of mistakes, big ones, things you'll never understand unless you've stood in alleys at 3 a.m., unless you've watched friends disappear and wondered if you'd be next. But the biggest mistake? I never told the people I loved that I loved them. Angela, she died never hearing it enough. Tommy, I pushed him away, thought I was protecting him, thought being cold would make him strong. But you know what it really did? It made him lonely. And that's what I left behind. Not fortune, not legacy, just echoes. Another silence. Then, softer now, almost whispering, if you're still listening, then I want you to know something. I dreamed of a better ending. Not a happy one. I didn't deserve that. But one where I could look at my family and say, I tried. That's what this tape is. My try. So if you take anything from me, let it be this. Love your people before they're ghosts. Speak out loud what you carry. And whatever you do, don't live like I did. Don't wait till the end to be human. Then, a pause. No more words for a few seconds, just breathing. Weaker. Then finally, I love you. Whoever you are. Wherever you are. That's all. That's enough. Click. The tape stopped. Ben sat perfectly still, not crying, not smiling, just breathing. Feeling the full weight of the man he never met, and somehow knew better than some people know their own fathers. He whispered to the room, "You were human, Lefty, and I heard you." Then he stood, walked to his bookshelf, took a small black box. Inside, a flash drive. He copied the final tape onto it, added the transcript. He labeled it, Lefty, the last voice, and uploaded it to the archive where the rest of the tapes already sat. Anonymous, free, accessible to anyone who wanted to understand the man behind the myth. A year later, a documentary student found the collection, turned it into a short film, nothing flashy, just a black screen with voiceover, minimal music, closed captions. It went viral. People shared clips, quoted the lines, "Don't wait till the end to be human. Love your people before they're ghosts." I didn't live clean, but I died honest. Suddenly, Lefty Ruggiero, the forgotten gangster, wasn't a name on a rap sheet. He was a voice, a man, a warning, and strangely, a comfort. Ben never told anyone he was related, not publicly. He didn't need to. He wore the chain, kept the pinky ring in a glass case, taught his own kids to tell the truth, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. And every year, on the same day, he went down to the East River, threw in a folded piece of paper, just a few words. Each year, a different one. Sometimes, I'm still listening. He was more than the lie. We're okay now. But once, just once, he wrote, "You were right. This life doesn't forget you, not if someone remembers you the right way." And he let the tide take it. No spotlight, no ceremony. Just one man telling another, you mattered, even when no one else thought you did. And that, finally, is where Lefty's story ends. Not in a courtroom, not in a back alley, not in a prison cell, but in the voice he left behind. A man who couldn't sleep through his sins, but who whispered them anyway, so someone else could. And in that way, he earned his peace.